Hello, St. Philip's Church family. I was supposed to be preaching this weekend, but since we're not having services, we decided to record the message and do it as a series of devotionals throughout the week. So be looking for more parts to come. Today we're looking at a parable from Matthew 25. I'm going to read it. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." While they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other ones also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." It's the word of the Lord. Now, this is a very interesting parable, but you have to understand when this is all taking place. In a few weeks, we're going to be jumping back to the Passover passage, but this passage actually takes place during Jesus' last week on earth. He's giving his last discourse. And if you remember when we first started our series in Matthew, I told you that Jesus gives 5 big blocks of teaching, 5 discourses in Matthew's gospel. And this is the last one. It's called the Olivet Discourse because it takes place on the Mount of Olives. And Jesus is teaching about what's going to happen when he returns at the second coming. And Jesus is telling them to be ready. Now, when my sister and I were little, we used to take our baths at night, the night before school. See, it was just easier that way. It was less work in the morning. My sister was a very interesting kid. She's still pretty interesting. And she wasn't bad, but she was definitely ornery. You never knew what she was going to do. And when I was about 10 years old, my sister was about 6, we noticed that she was getting ready very quickly in the morning. See, what would happen is my dad would yell up for us, "Tracey, Shannon," and then we'd yell down that we're coming. That was kind of the version of the alarm clock in the 1970s. And we'd have breakfast, and then we'd go upstairs and get ready. But my sister kept showing up for breakfast already dressed. Now, my parents were impressed at first. I, on the other hand, was suspicious. And one night, my parents went in to check on her, probably at my prompting, and she had the covers pulled way up to her neck, and it seemed a little odd. And so they went over and they pulled the covers down, and she was, I'm telling you, fully dressed, head to toe, shoes and all. And they asked her what on earth was going on. And she just looked at them with a smile and said, "I'm ready." And I thought, I knew it. But yeah, she was right. She was ready. Now, Jesus tells 4 parables around the theme of being ready, being watchful for the coming of the Son of Man. And before this passage, Jesus tells 2 stories. We looked at them last week. There's the story of the master who, if he had known when the thief was going to break into his house, he would have been ready. Then after that, there's the faithful and wise servant who, when the master goes away, he leaves him in charge of the household, and he takes good care of those in his charge. And when the master returns, he finds himself blessed because he's been doing what he's been called to do. But then there's the wicked servant, and the wicked servant thinks, well, the master seems to be taking his good old time to come home. And he abuses his privilege. He beats his fellow servants, and he ends up eating and drinking with drunkards. And the master comes home at a time he doesn't expect. He's not ready. And the master cuts him into pieces and sends him to the place where the hypocrites go, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So those are the first 2. The 4th parable takes place right after the one we read today, and it's the parable of the talents. What happens is a man is going away, and he entrusts his servants with his property. Okay? So to the first servant, he gives 5 talents. A talent is a unit of measure, a certain amount of gold and silver. And to the second one, he gives 3 talents. And to third, he gives 1 talent, each according to his ability. So none of them could say they were given more than they could handle. And when the master returns, he finds that the servant who was given 5 talents made 5 more in that time. The one who was given 3 made 3 more. But the one entrusted with 1 talent, he went and dug a hole and buried it. Now, to each of the first 2, the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." See, it's a parable about when Jesus suddenly returns and wants to know how we've been using the gifts he's given us. Did we use them for his glory, or did we bury them? Now, today's passage, just like the other ones, is about what's going to happen when Jesus returns. How will he find us? And Jesus says that the culmination or the full arrival of the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who take their lamps and go out to meet the bridegroom. Now, referring to them as virgins is just a way of saying that they're young, unmarried girls. We don't know a lot about first century Jewish weddings. Not a lot was written because they just understood what happened. But we do know that there was a betrothal, which is kind of like a heavy-duty engagement. A betrothal meant that you were already in contract with your fiancé. You just had to do the ceremony. We also know that at some point before the wedding, the bridegroom goes out and he gets his bride, and there are a few ceremonies, and then there's a procession, and they go to the bridegroom's house where the wedding banquet takes place. And you do not want to miss the wedding banquet. Now, the virgins are kind of like bridesmaids. We don't know exactly what their responsibilities were, but we do know that they're supposed to wait for the bridegroom at some designated place, maybe the bride's house, maybe another location, and they're to participate in the wedding procession, which is at night, so they need to take their lamps. Now, these 10 girls, they end up going to the place to wait for the bridegroom. The bridegroom symbolizes Jesus. 5 of them bring extra oil. Those are the wise. The other 5, the foolish, either bring no extra oil or maybe no oil at all. We can't tell the way that it's worded. Now, these lamps were either small oil-filled lanterns or more likely, they were probably torches with rags wrapped around them that were soaked in oil. Either way, the oil burns pretty quickly, so you have to bring extra oil with you. Now, for some reason, the bridegroom was delayed. Jesus doesn't tell us why. It's not important. We don't know if his tux wasn't ready at the dry cleaners or if they were still working out the dowry, the money that he would receive from the bride's family. We do know that while they were waiting, all 10 of the girls became drowsy and fell asleep. Now notice, they were not reprimanded for falling asleep. At midnight, and I think we'll stop right there. I'm going to leave you hanging so you can see what happens tomorrow. Thanks for joining. See you soon. God bless.